You know, when you think of Sherlock Holmes, you think of law and order. But what about the one time he didn't just bend the law? He absolutely shattered it. Today, we're diving into the case that forced Holmes to become a burglar, and even an accessory to murder, all in the name of a justice the courts just couldn't deliver.
And that really is the heart of this whole story, isn't it? We're about to watch the ultimate man of logic. The guy who stands for order decide that, you know what, the only way to get justice is to commit a major crime himself. So how on earth did he get to that point? Let's break it down. All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with Holmes's wild decision to turn criminal. Then we'll meet the guy who pushed him there, the so-called king of blackmailers. We'll see exactly how the legal system failed, which forces Holmes into this crazy burglary. And that's when things get really wild, with an act of vengeance that'll make you question what justice even means.
So what makes this particular story so different from all the others? I mean, really stand out? It's this. In his entire career, this is the one and only time Sherlock Holmes deliberately plans and carries out a serious crime. He's not just solving a crime here, he's committing one.
And look, this isn't some clever trick to trap a bad guy. Nope, Holmes is dead serious. He's planning to break into a guy's house, crack open his safe, and steal his property. He's made up his mind that saving innocent people from total ruin is worth it. It's his personal moral code versus the actual law of the land, and he's chosen his side.
So you have to ask, what kind of person, what kind of monster could push Sherlock Holmes over that line? Well, let me introduce you to Charles Augustus Milverton. This guy is living proof that the most dangerous villains aren't always the ones with blood on their hands.
See, Milverton isn't some back-alley thug. He's cultured, he's sophisticated, a real smooth operator. He lives in this gorgeous villa, but his business is ugly. He doesn't deal in stolen jewels, he deals in stolen secrets. He gets his hands on compromising letters, photos, you name it, and then he just squeezes his victims for every penny they have. And to him, it's nothing personal, it's just business.
And that is what makes him so uniquely awful, right? A normal murderer, they might act out of passion, they leave clues, a trail for Holmes to follow. Milverton is way more insidious than that. He never technically breaks the law. The secrets he's holding, legally they're his property. So he uses the system against his victims, causing this sort of emotional, social death without ever leaving a shred of evidence for the police.
Just stop and think about that for a second. This is Holmes we're talking about. He's gone up against murderers, spies, criminal geniuses, and yet his absolute deepest hatred is reserved for a guy who's never laid a finger on anyone. It's that cold, parasitic way he operates that makes Milverton, in Holmes's eyes, the absolute worst man in all of London.
Okay, so this is where the story really kicks into gear. A new client shows up, and her case is the perfect example of just how powerful Milverton is, and how completely useless the law is against him.
Her name is Lady Eva Blackwell, and she's about to make a fantastic marriage that will change her life. The problem? Milverton has some letters she wrote when she was younger. Now, you gotta remember, back then, a woman's reputation was everything. If those letters got out, it would be complete social ruin for her. Her entire future is basically being held for ransom.
And the price Milverton is demanding? £7,000. To put that in perspective for you, in today's money, that's well over £750,000. It's an absolutely insane amount of money, completely impossible for Lady Eva to pay. And Milverton knows that. He's not really trying to negotiate, he's setting an example. He wants to scare all his other potential victims into paying up without a fight.
Holmes actually goes to meet with Milverton face to face, but the guy just coldly shuts him down. And in that moment, Holmes gets it. There is no legal way out of this. The law is actually on Milverton's side. And that's it. That's the moment Holmes decides if you can't beat him, join him. He has to become the very thing he's always hunted, a criminal.
And the way Holmes goes about it is, well, it's pretty dark. He doesn't just stake out the house, he creates this whole fake identity, Scott, the plumber, to get inside. But here's the really shocking part. He actually seduces Milverton's housemate. He gets engaged to her, just to get information about the house layout and where the safe is. Watson is horrified, as you can imagine. But for Holmes, the ends totally justify these pretty awful means.
So the stage is set. You've got Holmes and a very reluctant Watson, dressed like a couple of pro-burglars, sneaking through the dark and rainy night. They're not detectives anymore.
They're criminals, and they're about to cross a line they can never, ever uncross.
But this is where the story goes from a simple burglary to something much, much darker. Because Holmes and Watson are about to walk into a situation that's way more dangerous than they ever could have imagined. So, Holmes is literally just about to crack the safe when they hear footsteps. It's Milverton. He's supposed to be asleep, but he walks right into the room. There's nowhere to go. Holmes and Watson just dive behind a thick curtain, completely trapped, and they become silent witnesses to what's about to unfold.
Then, a woman in a veil comes into the room. It turns out she's one of Milverton's old victims, a woman whose life he ruined and whose husband literally died of a broken heart because of it. And she's not here to beg. She's here for revenge. She looks him in the eye, tells him she's come to kill him, and then she pulls out a gun and just unloads it into him. And for a final, brutal exclamation point, she grinds her heel into his face before disappearing into the night. Now, Watson's gut reaction is to jump out and stop it, to stop the murder. But Holmes grabs his arm, holds him back hard. And right there in that split second, Holmes makes a decision. He decides this has nothing to do with them. This is justice of a different sort. A raw, brutal justice being served to a man who thought he was completely above it all.
The house is going crazy, alarms are going off, but Holmes, he doesn't even flinch. He just calmly walks over to that safe, which Milverton had opened, scoops up every last incriminating letter and photo, and shoves the whole pile into the roaring fireplace. He makes sure that Milverton's whole evil empire dies right there with him.
Somehow, they manage to escape. They're safe. But now, they're not just burglars anymore. They're witnesses to a murder, accessories after the fact. And sure enough, the very next morning, there's a knock on the door. It's the police. It's Inspector Lestrade from Scotland Yard, and he wants Holmes's help. And then you get this incredibly tense moment where Lestrade describes one of the burglars, and the description fits Watson perfectly. But Holmes, wow. He just coolly says he won't take the case, says his sympathies are actually with the criminals, and then he just masterfully misdirects Lestrade, setting the whole investigation off on a wild goose chase. He's protecting himself, Watson, and the mystery woman. And that's where Holmes plants his flag. He and Watson, they keep their mouths shut. They become silent partners in what they believe was a justified killing. The identity of that avenger? It's never revealed. In Holmes's mind, this was the only possible way to get real justice for all of Milverton's victims. So, in the end, we're left with this massive question, aren't we? When Holmes and Watson let a killer walk free and then actively lied to the police, were they serving some kind of higher justice? Or did the great detective just become another criminal, deciding that he and he alone got to be judge, jury, and the protector of an executioner?